And in my poetry, which I've come to in my old age also, I find that if I try to write a poem and it isn't genuine, if I don't really feel what's in the poem, I better not write it. So basically what I'm reading today has been referred to as a poem. It is a poem, but it's a story. It's called Irish-American Soup, A Christmas Fable by H.T. Clancy. H.T. Clancy is me when I'm being as deeply Irish as I can be. Now, this book, called The Great Hunger, fascinating book. The story of the famine of the 1840s, which killed 1 million Irish peasants. Mind-boggling.
Very Irish should be.
And sent hundreds of thousands to the New World and influenced history down to the present day. I mention that because although this is not a historical piece, I wanted you to know that the historical setting is as real as I could make it, and it's really quite factual. And it really does describe the situation in which the Irish found themselves for a lot of reasons, one of which is because that for a period of several hundred years they were so deeply persecuted for their faith in a way that we can't even imagine in this country, that they had to give up the right to own property, the right to serve in the military, the right to vote. They were literally breaking the law and could go to prison for going to Mass. And that situation went on for an awful long time. And then came the 19th century, the 1800s, by which time the Irish were living almost entirely on potatoes. I don't know if any of you had any potatoes today. Usually when we have potatoes, it's a little something extra. So you have to imagine people who were living on potatoes and buttermilk. And actually, it's surprising, but potatoes and buttermilk are a diet on which human beings can remain healthy and thrive, that they have those two things. Well, because there's something natural about it. I was going to bring a potato today and show it to you and say, this thing transformed Ireland, because potatoes were natural for the Irish soil and the Irish climate. And on 2 acres of ground, a family of 5 or 6 could support themselves just by growing potatoes. And they probably owned a pig or two, and they could get a hold of some buttermilk. So the population expanded, and then came the year 1845, and there was a blight that struck the potato crop. And it struck it again in 46 and again in 47. And by that time we had the Great Famine. And if it was just a tragic incident from history, I wouldn't be talking about it today. But what that tragic incident in history did was to spur the great Irish immigration. And just as the potato was a natural for Irish soil, the Irish were a natural for American soil. And there's a direct connection between the famine and the fact that so many of us are walking around in this country, and even some people who don't have a drop of Irish blood start feeling very Irish on St. Patrick's Day. Irish-American Soup, A Christmas Fable by H.T. Clancy. The winters are short in old Galway, and the snow is not long on the ground. Your sheep and your pigs, if you have any such, sleep outdoors without roof all year round. But there's high country too in old Galway, and the mountains we call Connemara get so cold that the devil's own nuggets would numb, and your whiskey would freeze in the jar if you carelessly left it outdoors. But I speak of a time when there wasn't much pigs, and whiskey was none to be had. And there wasn't no Irishman dancing no jigs, for great hunger was loose in the land. And cold is one thing when there's fat on your bones, and cold something else when your hand is just knuckles and skin, with your shins sticking out like an Englishman's sins, and you're living on just 2 potatoes a day. They ain't nothing to eat but potatoes, and they are scarcer than fleas on an oyster. There was 8 million Irish in Ireland then, twice the total that's living today there. For the famine killed many, and many more sailed to the States and decided to stay there. The year 'twas 1847, the third in a row, the potato crop failed, and 500,000 starved their way to heaven. This all starts with a pig named Patricia, one of Father Pat's proudest possessions, until Mickey Finn plucked that pig from her pen while Father was hearing confessions. Just to covet a pig is a venial sin, but to steal from your own parish priest makes it mortal or worse, and the penance, I think, 1,000 Hail Marys at least. But when Father Pat found that his pig had been pilfered, he declared it a sin of omission. "For I'm sure," Father thought, "he intended to pay, so as it wasn't no sin of commission, and I pardon whoever it was." Thus the pig, by original sin, was untainted, and Mickey the thief was absolved of his crime. Father Pat, may his memory be sainted, understood that a bit of indulgence at times is better than strict observation, especially when dealing with hungry men's crimes, when their children are facing starvation. Mickey Finn, knowing nothing of Father's forgiveness, was soon struck by fierce shafts of penitent guilt. Sure, he slaughtered the pig, but on timely repentance, on proper atonement, salvation is built. And instead of just hogging the hog for himself, and to fend off divine retribution, he halved and he quartered and 16th that pig and prepared it for swift distribution to his neighbors, the Shaughnessy's, Hennessy's, Cassidy's, O'Connells, O'Connors, O'Donnells, O'Briens, McCormick's, McTagles, McMurphys, McGee's, McGuire's, Mahoney's, Fitzgerald's, and Ryan's, Father Patrick himself, Father Duffy, his curate, an old maiden lady named Cordelia Dancy, and last but not least, or I wouldn't be here, young H.T. and his mother, the good widow Clancy. Mickey Finn, the purloiner of Father Pat's pig, until this point in time, was not known for his piety. Before the hard times, when the whiskey was plenty, he was cockeyed all week, minus 2 hours sobriety for a red-eye mass on Sunday morning. He cursed whenever his jug was empty. He blasphemed with splendid eloquence you'd think he had rehearsed. And I'm sure at night, with no one looking, dreamed debaucheries that I would rather not imagine. So when I tell you such a one as him was gifted with, and that his mouldy, mangy soul was lifted with, on Christmas Eve, in County Galway, far up Connemara Mountain, where the snow was drifting deep, hungry children all around him whimpering in their hungry sleep, with a radiant, sublime, and holy vision. Your response may be derision, incredulity, and doubt. Nonetheless, please hear me out. The voice he heard said unto him, "Make soup. Grind up the bones and boil the meat. Make soup." He did. He stayed up all that night. Some say a passing angel in her flight paused long enough to gather fuel and light a roaring peat fire underneath the pot, and from the dark woods fetch a lot of magic roots and herbs that people have forgot about, but angels still remember. And just before the dawn broke that December morning, all the mountain neighborhood, roused by the smell of something wondrous good, came trudging through the Connemara drifts and knew somehow to bring in offering gifts of peppercorns and onions they'd been hiding, oatmeal and barley flour providing thickening and aromatic flavor to the brew, a pint of pickled cabbage, 1 or 2 half-eaten carrots, and a few old chunks of frozen mutton fat were added to the stew, and other tasty tidbits of that ilk. And one, whose babe had passed away that night, brought her warm offering of mother's milk. Another brought sugar he had planned to hide away to give his kids a taste of something sweet before they died. And some brought only tears and cried them freely, adding a little Irish salt to that miraculous potation. A flask of holy water, Father Pat's donation, and all of a sudden, it was Christmas on that Galway mountainside. The bottomless cauldron of blessed broth, so nourishing throughout the coldest January in the memory of man, so nurtured the heroes who nursed on it that they still are flourishing, as are the comely Irish maidens whose prolific fire filled all the western world with passionate desire. They thrived. They found their way to leaky ships. They fled the old world's tyranny. They crossed the ocean. They found Our Lady of Democracy. They knew her words were meant for them, for they were raised on granite chastity and on maternal truth. And their devotion to her when they heard her say, "Give me your poor, and I will let them too breathe free," was boundless. And they took her at her word. and punch their way up to equality with Yankees, Krauts, and Limeys, intermarried with the Dagos, Spics, and Polacks, every Celt of them doing his bit or hers to help the melting pot to melt. And it's that mixture I have come to treasure, this grand American soup, beyond all measure precious, even though it's only just half-cooked. I've seen no better recipe than love and harmony in any place I've looked. And so, to every tribe and nation gazing together upward at the only moon, knowing as I know that only unity can stop the bloodshed soon, I offer unto you my lady, her that holds the golden spoon.
Very nice, wasn't it?
It was very
Yes, very.